They said the sterling diamond dragonfly was lost forever, vanished into the night with a runaway heiress 30 years ago. Beatrice Sterling, the billionaire matriarch of New York's toughest real estate dynasty, spent millions trying to find it. She failed, but fate has a funny way of working. On a rainy Tuesday, inside a crumbling diner in the middle of nowhere, Beatrice didn't just find the jewelry. She found the waitress wearing it. And what happened next didn't result in an arrest. It resulted in a secret being revealed that would bring a billion-dollar empire to its knees. Watch closely, because this isn't just a story about money. It's about the price of forgiveness. The rain in outskirts of Chicago wasn't just rain. It was a sheet of grey misery that washed the grime off the interstate and deposited it right onto the windshield of the custom Maybach. Inside the vehicle, the air smelled of expensive leather and suppressed tension. Beatrice Sterling sat in the back, her spine distinctively straight, despite being 78 years old. She checked her Patek Philippe watch. They were late. Beatrice Sterling was never late. She was the woman who had turned a small inheritance into the Sterling Group, a conglomerate that owned half the skyline of Manhattan and significant chunks of London. She didn't have patience for traffic, and she certainly didn't have patience for engine failure. "Edwards," she snapped, her voice like cracking ice. "Why are we slowing down?" The driver, a man who had served her for 2 decades and knew better than to make excuses, looked at the dashboard with genuine panic. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling. The electrical system it's shutting down. I have to pull over." Beatrice let out a sharp exhale through her nose. "We are in the middle of an industrial wasteland, Edwards. Do not tell me we are stranded." "I'll have the backup car here in 20 minutes, madam, but for now, we have to stop." The heavy car rolled to a silent halt in front of the only building with lights on for miles. The neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker. The Rusty Spoon Diner. The S in Spoon was missing. Beatrice looked out the tinted window with disdain. It was the kind of place where truck drivers stopped to regret their life choices. "I am not sitting in a dead car in the freezing rain, Edwards. I'm going inside." Edwards scrambled to open the door with an umbrella, but the wind whipped Beatrice's cashmere coat as she stepped onto the cracked pavement. She marched toward the diner, her heels clicking a rhythm of irritation. Inside, the diner was a sensory assault. It smelled of burnt bacon, stale cigarette smoke, even though smoking was banned, and floor cleaner. The linoleum was peeling at the corners. There were 3 customers, 2 men in mechanic jumpsuits arguing about sports, and an old man nursing a black coffee in the corner. And then there was the waitress. Ilara Jenkins wiped the counter with a rag that had seen better days. She was 24, but the dark circles under her hazel eyes made her look older. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, held together by a cheap plastic clip. She wore a stained pink uniform that was a size too big, hiding a frame that was too thin. "Welcome to the Rusty Spoon," Ilara said, her voice tired but practiced. She didn't look up immediately. She was too busy mentally calculating her tips for the day. If she made another $12, she could buy the antibiotics her mother needed for her bronchitis. If she didn't, well, she'd have to skip dinner again. "Table for 1, Beatrice said, standing in the doorway like royalty inspecting a dungeon. "And tea, Earl Grey, if you have it." Ilara looked up then, and she blinked. It wasn't often they got customers wearing a coat that cost more than the diner itself. "We have Lipton, ma'am. That's about it." Beatrice sighed, removing her wet coat. "Lipton will have to do. And a clean cup, please." Beatrice sat in a booth by the window, keeping her purse clutched tight. She watched the waitress move. The girl was clumsy, clearly exhausted. She nearly dropped the sugar dispenser. Beatrice felt a flicker of judgment. Sloppy, she thought. No discipline. It was the same lack of discipline she had despised in her own daughter, Elizabeth, 30 years ago. The thought of Elizabeth brought the familiar, dull ache to Beatrice's chest. The fight, the screaming match in the foyer of the Sterling Manor. Elizabeth shouting that she chose love over money. Beatrice shouting that if she walked out that door, she was dead to the family. Elizabeth had walked, and she had taken the family's most prized possession with her, the sterling dragonfly. A brooch made of Colombian emeralds and flawless diamonds, shaped like a dragonfly. It wasn't just jewelry, it was the symbol of the sterling matriarchy, passed down for 4 generations. Beatrice shook the memory away. That was ancient history. Elizabeth was gone. Investigators had lost her trail in Europe decades ago. "Here's your tea, ma'am." Beatrice looked up. Elara was leaning over the table, placing the mug down on a paper napkin. As Elara leaned forward, the top button of her uniform strained slightly. A silver chain, previously hidden beneath the high collar of the polyester fabric, swung loose. Time stopped for Beatrice Sterling. It swung like a pendulum, heavy, glittering, and unmistakable. It was dirty. It was caked with years of grime and lacked a polish, but there was no mistaking the setting. The wings were articulated. The eyes were 2 distinct rubies. The body was a cascade of emeralds. The sterling dragonfly. Beatrice's heart hammered against her ribs, so hard she thought it might crack them. She couldn't breathe. The room narrowed down to that piece of metal hanging around the neck of a waitress in a roadside dive. "Wait," Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling in a way that terrified her. Elara paused, looking confused. "Did you want cream?" "I can get cream." Beatrice's hand shot out, grabbing Elara's wrist with a grip of iron. "Mum," Elara yelped, trying to pull her arm back. "You're hurting me." Beatrice didn't let go. Her blue eyes, usually cold and composed, were wide with a mixture of rage and disbelief. She stood up, knocking the table, spilling the hot tea all over the laminated surface. "Where did you get that?" Beatrice hissed. She reached out with her other hand, her manicured fingers brushing the cold metal of the brooch. Elara flinched violently, covering her chest with her free hand. Terror flooded her veins. This rich woman was crazy. She was going to accuse her of stealing. That was the last thing Elara needed. She was already on probation with the diner manager, Rick. 1 complaint, and she was out. "Let go of me!" Elara cried out, her voice rising in panic. "It's mine! It's my mother's!" "Liar!" Beatrice shouted, the word tearing out of her throat. "That is the sterling dragonfly. It was stolen 30 years ago. Who are you? Did you steal it? Did you buy it from a fence?" The commotion drew the attention of the entire diner. The 2 mechanics stood up. The old man in the corner lowered his paper. Suddenly, the kitchen door swung open, and Rick, the manager, stormed out. Rick was a man who sweated grease and thrived on bullying his staff. He saw the wealthy woman gripping Elara and immediately made his calculation. The customer is rich, the waitress is expendable. "What is going on here?" Rick bellowed, marching over. "Elara, what did you do to this lady?" "I didn't do anything," Elara pleaded, tears springing to her eyes. "She grabbed me, she's crazy." "Shut up," Rick snapped at Elara. He turned to Beatrice, putting on an oily smile. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. Has this employee assaulted you? I'll call the police right now." "Police?" Elara gasped. "Rick, please. She's trying to take my necklace." Beatrice ignored Rick entirely. She was locked in a trance, staring at Elara's face. Now that the adrenaline was pumping, she looked closer. Beneath the fatigue, beneath the lack of makeup and the cheap clothes, There was a shape to the jawline, a specific arch to the eyebrows. Elizabeth? No. Elizabeth would be 50 years old. This girl was a child. "Who gave that to you?" Beatrice demanded, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low register. She released Ilara's wrist but blocked her path. "You said your mother. What is your mother's name?" Ilara was rubbing her wrist, her chest heaving. She felt trapped. "Why do you care? It's just costume jewelry. It's glass." "It is not glass!" Beatrice screamed, slamming her hand on the booth. "It is worth $3 million. The silence that followed that number was deafening. Rick's eyes bulged. He looked at the necklace around Ilara's neck with a sudden, predatory hunger. $3 million? Ilara froze. "You're insane. It's just a thing my mum gave me before she got sick. She wore it every day." "What is her name?" Beatrice persisted, stepping closer, invading Ilara's personal space. "Tell me her name." Ilara looked around for help, but no one moved. She felt small and cornered. "Her name is Marie Jenkins. Now leave me alone." Marie. The name hit Beatrice like a physical slap. Beatrice staggered back, her hand clutching her chest. Marie. That was the name of the doll Elizabeth used to play with. The name Elizabeth had said she would use if she ever ran away, so she could be someone else. Someone free. Beatrice looked at Ilara, really looked at her. She saw the hazel eyes. Elizabeth had green eyes, but Beatrice's late husband, Charles, had hazel eyes. The room began to spin. The smell of the burnt bacon became nauseating. The lights of the diner seemed to stretch and warp. "Marie," Beatrice whispered. Is she here?" "She's at home," Ilara said defensively, buttoning her uniform up to hide the necklace, terrified of the way Rick was looking at her now. "She's bedridden. Not that it's any of your business." Beatrice felt her legs give out. The emotional shock was too much for her heart condition. She grasped at the edge of the booth, but her fingers slipped. "Ma'am!" Edwards, the driver, burst into the diner, soaking wet, his umbrella collapsing. He had seen the commotion through the window. He was too late to catch her. Beatrice Sterling, the Iron Lady of New York, collapsed onto the sticky floor of the Rusty Spoon, her pearls clattering against the linoleum. "Call 911!" Edwards shouted, rushing to her side. Rick stood frozen, looking from the unconscious billionaire to the waitress. He wasn't looking at Ilara's face, though. He was looking at the lump beneath her shirt, where a $3 million ticket out of this town was hiding. Ilara dropped to her knees, instinct taking over fear. "She's not breathing right! Turn her on her side!" Ilara yelled, her hands moving to help the woman who had just assaulted her. As Ilara brushed the hair from Beatrice's clammy forehead, the old woman's eyes fluttered open for a split second. She looked up at Ilara, her vision blurring, and whispered one word before the darkness took her. "Granddaughter." Ilara recoiled as if burned. She didn't hear it clearly. She thought the woman had said, "Got you." Sirens wailed in the distance, cutting through the rain. But inside the diner, the storm was just beginning. The VIP wing of St. Jude's Hospital was quiet, smelling of expensive lilies and antiseptic. It was a stark contrast to the grease and noise of the Rusty Spoon diner. Preston Sterling marched down the hallway, his Italian leather shoes making no sound on the polished floor. He was a handsome man in the way a shark is handsome, sleek, sharp, and terrifying if you got too close. At 45, he was Beatrice's nephew and the acting CFO of the Sterling Group. He had spent the last 15 years waiting for two things: for his aunt to die, and for the inheritance that would finally cover the massive debts he had racked up gambling on bad real estate deals in Macau. He adjusted his silk tie, composed his face into a mask of concern, and pushed open the door to room 402. Beatrice was awake. She looked small in the hospital bed, the wires and monitors making her appear frail for the first time in his life. But when she turned her head, her blue eyes were still sharp enough to cut glass. "Aunt Beatrice," Preston said, his voice dripping with synthetic honey. "My God. Edwards called me. A heart episode. You have to slow down." "Stop acting, Preston," Beatrice croaked, her voice raspy. "You're wondering if I've updated the will." Preston chuckled nervously, pulling a chair close. "Always the joker. I'm just glad you're okay. The doctor said it was a severe shock. What happened out there in the middle of nowhere?" Beatrice stared at the ceiling tiles. The image of the girl, Ilara, burned in her mind. The hazel eyes, the chin, and the dragonfly. "I saw her," Beatrice whispered. Preston frowned. "Saw who?" "Elizabeth." Preston stiffened. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Aunt B, Elizabeth is dead. We stopped looking 10 years ago. The investigators said she likely died in that boating accident in Greece." "They never found a body," Beatrice snapped, finding a surge of strength. "And I didn't see Elizabeth. I saw her daughter." Preston's heart skipped a beat, then hammered against his ribs. "Her daughter? Auntie, the medication is making you confused. Elizabeth never had children. If she did, we would know." "I saw the brooch, Preston," Beatrice said, turning to face him, her expression intense. "The sterling dragonfly. It was around the girl's neck. A waitress. She had Charles's eyes. She had Elizabeth's smile." Beatrice grabbed Preston's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You have to find her. Her name is Ilara Jenkins. She works at a diner called the Rusty Spoon off Interstate 90. Go there. Bring her to me. I need to know." Preston nodded slowly, his mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. If Beatrice found a direct heir, a granddaughter, Preston would get nothing. The entire estate would bypass the nephew and go straight to the direct line. He would be destitute. The loan sharks in Macau wouldn't just sue him. They would kill him. "Of course, Aunt B," Preston said, patting her hand soothingly. "I will handle it personally. I'll send a team to locate this Ilara Jenkins. If she's family, we'll bring her home." "Do not send a team," Beatrice warned, her eyes narrowing. "Go yourself, and take Edwards. I trust Edwards." "Edwards is exhausted," Preston lied smoothly. "I sent him home to sleep. Don't worry. Rest now. I'll take care of everything." He waited until Beatrice's eyes drifted shut, lulled by the sedatives the nurse had administered earlier. Preston stood up, his face transforming from concerned nephew to cold calculation. He walked out of the room and pulled out his encrypted phone. He didn't call the family lawyers. He didn't call the private investigators Beatrice used. He dialed a number saved only as Gorman. "Mr. Sterling," the voice on the other end answered. It was a gravelly voice, devoid of emotion. Gorman was a fixer, an ex-cop who had been kicked off the force for excessive force and evidence tampering. "I have a situation," Preston said, walking toward the elevator, away from the prying ears of the nurses. "A loose end has popped up. A girl, Ilara Jenkins. She's a waitress at the Rusty Spoon diner on I-90. "What do you need?" "I need the item she is wearing, a diamond and emerald brooch, and I need the girl to disappear. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. A drug deal? I don't care. Just make sure she never speaks to Beatrice Sterling." "And the jewelry?" "Bring it to me. It's the proof I need to destroy." Preston hung up as the elevator doors closed. He caught his reflection in the metal doors. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a businessman protecting his investment. Meanwhile, back at the Rusty Spoon, the atmosphere was toxic. The ambulance had left with Beatrice an hour ago. The diner was empty, save for Rick and Ilara. The rain was still hammering against the roof, leaking into buckets scattered around the floor. Elara was sitting on a stool, shaking. She was holding a cup of lukewarm water. She couldn't stop thinking about the old woman's face, the way she had whispered, "Granddaughter." "So," Rick said, leaning against the counter. He was chewing on a toothpick, his eyes beady and calculating. $3 million. Elara looked up, startled. "Rick, stop. The lady was crazy. It's fake. My mum bought it at a flea market." "You expect me to believe a billionaire had a heart attack over a piece of glass?" Rick laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I looked that lady up on my phone. Beatrice Sterling, worth $4 billion. If she says that thing is real, it's real." He took a step toward her. Elara stood up, backing away until she hit the pie display case. "Rick, you're scaring me." "You know what scares me, Elara?" Rick's voice dropped. "Bankruptcy. I owe the bank 50 grand on this dump. And you've been walking around with the solution around your scrawny neck for months." "It's not mine to sell," Elara cried. "It's my mother's." "Your mother is a vegetable," Rick spat. "She won't know the difference. Give it to me. I'll sell it, and I'll give you, let's say, 10 grand. That's more money than you'll see in a lifetime." "No!" Elara clutched the collar of her uniform tight. Rick's face turned red. "You ungrateful little rat. I gave you a job when no one else would. Give me the necklace." He lunged for her. Elara screamed and ducked. Rick was heavy and slow. Elara was small and fast. She scrambled under his arm, grabbing her backpack from under the counter. "You're fired!" Rick screamed as she bolted for the door. "Don't come back, and I'm calling the cops. I'll tell them you stole it from the register." Elara didn't look back. She burst out into the rain, the cold water soaking her instantly. She didn't have a car. She usually took the bus, but the last bus had run an hour ago. She began to run. She ran along the shoulder of the dark highway, the headlights of passing trucks blinding her, the spray of dirty water coating her legs. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs felt like lead. She had to get to the trailer. She had to ask her mother the truth. But more importantly, she had a terrible feeling in the pit of her stomach. A primal instinct that told her the old woman wasn't the only one coming for her. The home Elara shared with her mother wasn't really a house. It was a single-wide trailer from the 1980s, parked on a rented plot of land deep in the woods, 3 miles from the main road. The aluminum siding was peeling, and the roof was covered in a blue tarp to keep the leaks out. Elara burst through the flimsy front door, shivering uncontrollably. She locked the deadbolt behind her, a futile gesture, given that a strong kick could take the door off its hinges. "Mum!" she called out, stripping off her wet uniform. The trailer smelled of Vicks Vapo Rub and old paper. The living room was piled high with books, hundreds of them. It was their one luxury. Her mother, Marie, had always been obsessed with reading. "It's the only way to travel when you're poor," she used to say. A coughing fit answered her from the back bedroom. Elara rushed in. The room was dim, lit only by a small bedside lamp. Marie Jenkins lay under a pile of heavy quilts. She was pale, her skin almost translucent, her once beautiful hair now thin and grey. At 50 she looked 70. The illness, an aggressive autoimmune disorder they couldn't afford to properly diagnose, let alone treat, was eating her alive. "Elara?" Marie whispered, her eyes fluttering open. "You're home early. Did you bring the soup?" Elara fell to her knees beside the bed, grabbing her mother's cold hand. "Mum, listen to me. Something happened. Something bad." Marie tried to sit up, alarm cutting through her fog. "What? Did Rick hurt you?" "No. Well, yes, he fired me. But that's not it." Ilara fumbled with the buttons of her shirt and pulled out the necklace. The dragonfly glittered in the dim light, looking alien in the poverty of the room. A woman came to the diner. A rich woman. Beatrice Sterling. Marie gasped. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. She recoiled from the name, as if Ilara had slapped her. "No," Marie whimpered, pulling the covers up. "No, no, no. She found us. I knew she would. I knew it. Mum." Ilara shook her gently. "Who is she?" She said I was her granddaughter. She called this the Sterling Dragonfly. She said it's worth $3 million. Marie began to cry, harsh, racking sobs that shook her fragile body. "I told you never to wear it. I told you to keep it hidden. I had to wear it. The clasp on my locker broke and I didn't want it stolen," Ilara shouted, desperate for answers. "Mum, is it true? Are you Elizabeth Sterling?" Marie stopped crying. She looked at Ilara, and for a moment the sickness seemed to vanish, replaced by a terrified clarity. "I haven't been Elizabeth for 30 years, she whispered. "Elizabeth died the day she left that house. I am Marie." "Why?" Ilara asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why did you leave? We've been starving, Mum. We've been living in dirt. If you were rich, if we had family—" "It wasn't family," Marie hissed, gripping Ilara's arm with surprising strength. "It was a cage. Beatrice. She controlled everything. Who I married, what I wore, what I thought. She wanted to marry me off to a business partner, a man twice my age, just to merge 2 real estate firms. I refused. She locked me in my room for weeks." Marie took a ragged breath. "I fell in love with the gardener, your father. He was kind, Ilara. He was poor, but he was kind. Beatrice found out. She destroyed him. She paid people to ruin his life, to frame him for crimes he didn't commit. He killed himself because of her." Ilara covered her mouth, horror washing over her. "So I ran," Marie said, her voice trembling. "I took the brooch. It was the only thing my grandmother, Beatrice's mother, left me directly. It was my only leverage. I thought if I got desperate, I'd sell it. But I was too scared. I thought if I sold it, they'd track the sale and find me. So we hid. We hid for 30 years. She saw me, Mom," Ilara said, her voice shaking. "She knows." "Then we have to go," Marie said, trying to swing her legs out of bed. "Now. Tonight. Before she sends the wolves." "She's in the hospital," Ilara said. "She had a heart attack." "It doesn't matter," Marie cried, panic rising. "Beatrice isn't the only one. There are others. Preston, my cousin. He's a snake. If he knows—" "Ilara, get the bag. The red bag under the sink." Ilara stood up, her head spinning. This was insane. She was the heiress to $1 billion fortune, but her mother was acting like they were fugitives from the mafia. "Mum, you can't walk. We can't go anywhere. We have to." Suddenly, the gravel outside crunched. Both women froze. They lived 3 miles into the woods. No one came here. Not at night. Slowly, headlights swept across the thin curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The low rumble of a heavy engine cut off, followed by the sound of car doors slamming. "How many?" Marie whispered, her eyes wide with terror. Ilara crept to the window and peered through a crack in the blinds. A black SUV was parked next to their rotting porch. 2 men were stepping out. One was huge, wearing a dark raincoat. The other was holding something long and metallic. A crowbar or a gun? 2 men, Ilara whispered. "They don't look like police." "Preston," Marie breathed. "He sent them. He doesn't want an heir. He wants the money." "What do we do?" Ilara asked, her voice hitching. "The floorboard," Marie said, pointing to the corner of the room, under the rug. Hide the brooch. Put it in the box. Then go out the back window. I'm not leaving you. You have to. They want the jewelry, Elara. If you have it, they'll kill you. If you don't, maybe they'll just... Look, they're coming for us, Mum. Not just the jewelry. The first heavy thud hit the front door. Bam! The flimsy wood groaned. Open up! A deep voice bellowed. It was Gorman. Police! We have a warrant. He's lying, Elara said. Police don't knock like that. Bam! The door frame splintered. Elara made a split-second decision. She wasn't going to leave her mother to die, and she wasn't going to let them win. She grabbed the heavy iron poker from the small wood stove in the corner. Help me up, Marie gritted out. Elara pulled her mother up. They moved into the narrow hallway, just as the front door gave way with a deafening crash. Rain and wind swirled into the living room, carrying the two men with it. Gorman stepped in first, his boots muddying the carpet. He looked around the small space with a sneer. Well, well, Gorman said, spotting them in the hallway. The runaway princess and the little waitress. Isn't this cozy? Get out! Elara screamed, brandishing the poker. I called the cops. They're on their way. Gorman laughed. Honey, out here. The cops take 40 minutes. We only need 5. He pulled a silencer-equipped pistol from his coat. Where is it? Gorman asked calmly. Give me the dragonfly and I'll make it quick. Don't. And I'll make you watch me hurt your mother first. Elara's blood ran cold. She felt the heavy weight of the brooch in her pocket. Don't give it to him, Elara, Marie wheezed, leaning against the wall. He's going to kill us anyway. Gorman sighed. Have it your way. He raised the gun. Crash. The window in the kitchen exploded inward. A canister hissed across the floor, spinning and spewing thick white smoke. Tear gas! The second mercenary shouted, coughing. What the hell? Gorman spun around, trying to aim through the sudden cloud. Elara didn't wait to see who had thrown it. Mum! Move! Adrenaline giving them strength, Elara dragged her mother into the bathroom and locked the door, shoving towels under the crack. Who threw that? Marie coughed, her eyes watering. I don't know, Elara gasped. She looked at the tiny bathroom window. It was too small for her mother. They were trapped. Outside the door, they heard coughing, swearing, and the sound of fist-meeting flesh. It sounded like a brawl. Edwards! A voice shouted from the living room. But it wasn't Gorman's voice. It was older, refined, but furious. Elara pressed her ear to the door. You back off, the new voice shouted. I said back off! There was a loud thump, like a body hitting the floor, followed by the sound of running footsteps retreating. Clear! The voice shouted. Silence. Elara gripped the poker, her heart hammering against her ribs. Elara Jenkins, the voice called out. My name is Arthur Edwards. I drive for Beatrice Sterling. Please come out. I'm here to help. Elara looked at her mother. Marie's eyes widened. Edwards, she whispered. He used to drive me to school. He was the only one who was kind. Elara slowly unlocked the bathroom door. Standing in the smoke-filled living room was the man from the diner, the driver. He was holding a tire iron, and his nose was bleeding. On the floor, one of the mercenaries was unconscious. The other, Gorman, was gone. Edwards looked at Marie, and his face crumbled. He dropped the tire iron and bowed his head. Miss Elizabeth, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I finally found you. Edwards, Marie choked out. We have to move, Edwards said urgently, stepping over the unconscious hitman. The one who ran. He'll be calling for backup. Preston won't stop with just 2 men. Is the car out back running? We don't have a car, Elara said. Edwards cursed under his breath. Okay. My car is hidden down the logging road. We have to walk. Can you make it?" Ilara looked at her mother, who was barely standing. "We have no choice," Ilara said. She wrapped her arm around her mother's waist. "Where are we going?" Ilara asked Edwards as they stepped out into the storm, leaving the only home she had ever known. Edwards looked at her, the rain plastering his grey hair to his forehead. "To the one place Preston can't touch you," Edwards said grimly. "We're going back to the manor." The drive to the Sterling estate took an hour, but to Ilara it felt like crossing into another dimension. The rain had finally stopped, leaving a heavy mist clinging to the ground. As Edward steered the car off the main road and onto a private asphalt drive, the trees seemed to grow taller, effectively blocking out the rest of the world. "Mum," Ilara whispered, squeezing Marie's hand in the back seat. "Stay with me." Marie was fading. The adrenaline of the escape had worn off, leaving her trembling and feverish. She looked out the window with haunted eyes. "I never thought I'd see these gates again," she murmured. "I promised myself I'd die before I came back here." "You're not going to die," Ilara said fiercely. "We're going to get help. Edward said they have doctors." The car slowed as it approached a massive wrought-iron gate, flanked by stone lions. Edwards rolled down the window and punched a code into a keypad. The gates groaned open, revealing a winding driveway that led up to a house that looked more like a castle than a home. Sterling Manor was a monstrosity of grey stone, turrets, and dark windows. It sat on a hill, looming over the landscape like a brooding beast. "It's cold," Ilara said, shivering despite the car's heater. "The whole place looks cold." "It is," Marie whispered. "There is no warmth in those walls, only ambition." Edwards parked the car under the portico. He moved quickly, opening the back door and helping Ilara support Marie. "We have to be quick," Edwards said, his voice low. "Preston usually stays at his penthouse in the city, but after the hospital incident, he might be here securing the assets. We need to get to Madame Beatrice before he intercepts us." They entered through the servants' entrance, a habit Edwards couldn't break, or perhaps a tactical choice to avoid the main foyer. They navigated a maze of corridors lined with portraits of stern-looking ancestors. "Edwards!" a voice called out from the shadows. Ilara froze. An elderly woman in a maid's uniform stepped out. She looked at Edwards, then at the two soaking wet women. Her eyes widened as they landed on Marie. Miss Elizabeth?" the maid gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Martha," Marie croaked, a faint smile touching her lips. "You're still here." "Oh my God," Martha whispered, tears welling up. "We thought you were—" "Come, quickly. Madam is in the blue drawing room. She refused to stay at the hospital. She's demanding to see the lawyers." "Is Preston with her?" Edwards asked sharply. "Not yet. He's in the study on a conference call. You have maybe 5 minutes." They moved faster. Ilara felt like she was walking through a museum, afraid to touch anything. The wealth displayed here was obscene compared to the trailer they had just fled. Edwards pushed open a set of heavy mahogany doors. The blue drawing room was vast, lit by a roaring fireplace. Sitting in a high-backed velvet armchair, wrapped in a blanket, was Beatrice Sterling. She looked frailer than she had in the diner, her skin the color of parchment. An IV stand was next to her chair, a private nurse checking the drip. "Leave us," Beatrice commanded the nurse without looking up. Her voice was weak, but carried an undeniable authority. The nurse hesitated, then nodded and left, closing the doors. Beatrice stared into the fire. "Edwards, did you find them?" "I did, madam," Edwards said softly. Beatrice turned her head. The silence that filled the room was heavy enough to crush bone. Beatrice's eyes locked onto Marie. She didn't look at the rags, the mud, or the grey hair. She looked at the face of the daughter she had driven away 30 years ago. "Elizabeth," Beatrice breathed. Marie didn't step forward. She leaned heavily on Elara, her breathing ragged. "Hello, Mother." Beatrice tried to stand, her hands gripping the armrests, but her legs wouldn't support her. She collapsed back, a sob escaping her throat. "You look so tired." "Poverty ages you," Marie said, her voice devoid of warmth. "And sickness." Beatrice's gaze shifted to Elara. She studied the young woman's defiant stance, the protective way she held her mother. "And you?" Beatrice whispered. "The waitress. Elara." "I'm her daughter," Elara said, her chin high. "And we didn't come here for a reunion. We came because men with guns broke into our home. Men your nephew sent." Beatrice's face hardened. "Preston, he sent men?" "They tried to kill us," Elara said, her voice shaking with anger. "They wanted the necklace. Edwards saved us." Beatrice looked at Edwards, who nodded grimly. "It was Gorman, madam. Preston's fixer. He had orders to eliminate them." A flash of the old Iron Lady returned to Beatrice's eyes. She slammed her hand onto the side table. "That vulture! I will bury him!" "You created him," Marie said quietly. "Just like you tried to create me." Beatrice winced. I know I have much to atone for. Elizabeth, please, come closer. Let me see you." Marie hesitated. Elara felt her mother trembling. "It's okay, Mom," Elara whispered. They took a few steps forward. Beatrice reached out a shaking hand, her fingers brushing the rough fabric of Marie's coat. "I searched for you." Beatrice wept, the tears finally spilling over. "For 20 years I searched. I wanted to tell you I was wrong. I wanted to tell you that the money, it didn't matter without you." "It mattered enough to destroy my husband," Marie said, pulling away slightly. "It mattered enough to make me live in fear for half a life." "I was proud," Beatrice admitted, her voice cracking. "And I was cruel. But I am dying, Elizabeth. My heart is failing. And when I saw the dragonfly, I knew God was giving me one last chance." Beatrice looked at Elara. "Show me. Please." Elara reached into her pocket and pulled out the sterling dragonfly. Even in the dim firelight, it blazed with brilliance. She placed it in Beatrice's palm. Beatrice closed her fingers around it, closing her eyes. "My mother gave this to me. I gave it to you. It was never lost. It was just waiting." "We don't want the brooch," Elara said firmly. "And we don't want your empire. We just want to be safe. Call off your dogs, and we will leave." "Leave?" Beatrice shook her head violently. "No. You are sterling blood. You are the heir. This house is yours. This company is yours." "I don't want it," Elara said. "You have no choice," Beatrice insisted. "If you don't take it, Preston will. And you have seen what he is capable of. He will burn the world to get what he wants. You have to fight him, Elara. You have to." The heavy doors banged open. Beatrice stopped. Elara spun around. Preston Sterling stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, and his face was flushed with exertion and rage. Behind him stood 2 large private security guards in tactical gear. "Well," Preston sneered, walking into the room like he owned it. "Isn't this a touching family reunion? The prodigal daughter returns from the dead, and she brought the little stray with her." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly from tragic to volatile. Edward stepped in front of Elara and Marie, his hand reaching inside his jacket, but Preston snapped his fingers. "Don't even think about it, Edwards," Preston warned. "My men are armed, and unlike you, they aren't afraid to shoot an old man." Beatrice struggled to sit up straighter, channeling every ounce of her dwindling strength. "Get out of my house, Preston. You are fired. You are disinherited. I want you gone tonight." Preston laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that bounced off the stone walls. "You can't fire me, Aunt Beatrice," Preston said, walking over to the fireplace and warming his hands, completely ignoring the gun Edwards was now holding. "Because as of an hour ago, you are legally incompetent." "What?" Ilara stepped forward. "What are you talking about?" Preston pulled a folded document from his back pocket and waved it in the air. "Emergency power of attorney, signed by Dr. Harris, who is on my payroll, by the way, and a judge who owes me a favor. Given your heart episode and your hallucinations about dead relatives, it was determined that you are no longer fit to manage your own affairs. I am the conservator of the Sterling estate." He turned to look at them, his eyes dead. "I control the money. I control the house. I control the security." "You forged it," Beatrice spat. "My lawyers will destroy you." "Your lawyers work for me now," Preston countered. He looked at Marie with a look of pure disgust. "And as for you, Elizabeth, you should have stayed dead. It would have been cleaner." "You tried to kill us," Ilara accused him, stepping around Edwards. "You sent men to our trailer." "Prove it," Preston smiled. "I see 2 trespassers who broke into a secure estate. I see a senile old woman being manipulated by con artists." He turned to the security guards. "Escort these 2 women off the property. If they resist, arrest them for burglary. The old one looks like she stole that coat from a dumpster anyway." "No!" Beatrice screamed, trying to stand up, but her legs gave out and she fell back into the chair, gasping for air. The monitor on the IV stand began to beep rapidly. "Grandmother!" Ilara cried out, rushing to Beatrice's side. "Don't touch her!" Preston barked. "Get them out!" The guards moved forward. Edwards blocked the first one, grabbing his arm and twisting it with a move that belied his age, but the second guard tackled Edwards, slamming him into the bookshelf. Books and porcelain vases crashed to the floor. "Stop it!" Marie shrieked, finding a sudden burst of energy. She threw herself between the guard and Ilara. Preston grabbed Ilara by the arm, his grip bruising. "Give me the brooch. Now!" "I don't have it!" Ilara yelled, struggling. "I saw the old hag take it," Preston hissed. He reached toward Beatrice, who was clutching the jewelry to her chest, her face turning grey. Preston pried Beatrice's fingers open. The old woman was too weak to fight him. He snatched the sterling dragonfly from her hand and held it up to the light, a look of triumph twisting his face. "Finally," he whispered, "the key to the vault." "It's not the key," Beatrice wheezed, her eyes rolling back. "Shut up, old woman," Preston snapped. He turned to Ilara. "You think this is just jewelry? This brooch contains the microfilm codes for the offshore accounts your grandfather set up. Codes that bypass the board of directors. With this, I don't need the company. I can drain the liquid assets and disappear." Ilara looked at him, realizing the depth of his greed. He wasn't just trying to keep the company, he was trying to gut it. "You're a monster," Ilara said. "I'm a survivor," Preston corrected. He pocketed the brooch. "Take them to the wine cellar. Lock them in. We'll deal with the intruders once Beatrice passes. It will be a tragic night." The shock of the break-in was too much for her heart. The guards dragged Edwards up from the floor. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. They grabbed Marie, who was sobbing hysterically. "No!" Ilara fought, kicking Preston in the shin. He grunted, but didn't let go. He backhanded her across the face. Ilara tasted blood. She fell to the carpet, the room spinning. "Take her!" Preston ordered the guards. As the guards hauled Ilara and her mother toward the door, Beatrice let out a long, rattling breath. "Preston," Beatrice whispered. Preston paused, looking back at his dying aunt. "Goodbye, Auntie." "The wings," Beatrice gasped. Preston frowned. He pulled the brooch out of his pocket. What? The wings. Preston looked at the dragonfly. He manipulated the articulated wings. Click! A tiny hidden needle shot out from the body of the dragonfly, pricking Preston's thumb. Ouch! Preston dropped the brooch. He looked at his thumb. A singular drop of blood welled up. What is this? Preston demanded. What did you do? Beatrice slumped back in her chair, a ghost of a smile on her face. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes were open and watching him. Security measure, Beatrice whispered. Grandfather. Didn't trust. Thieves. Preston looked at his hand. His thumb was going numb. The numbness was spreading quickly up his wrist. What was on that needle? Preston screamed, panic suddenly shattering his composure. Answer me. Neurotoxin, Edwards said, his voice ragged as he stood held by the guard. South American tree frog, non-lethal usually, but it paralyzes the motor functions for 6 hours. Immediate onset. You're lying! Preston tried to raise his hand to strike Edwards, but his arm wouldn't move. It hung limp at his side. My legs! Preston gasped. He stumbled. I can't feel my legs. He collapsed to the floor, not like a man fainting, but like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He lay there, eyes wide with terror, fully conscious, but unable to move a muscle. The guards looked at each other, confused. The check signer was down. He pays you, Ilara said, wiping the blood from her lip and standing up. Her voice was strong, echoing through the room. But she owns the money. She pointed to Beatrice, and I am her heir. If you want to get paid, you will listen to me. The guards hesitated. They looked at the paralyzed Preston, then at the dying billionaire, and finally at the waitress who stood with the fury of a queen. Call an ambulance, Ilara commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. For my grandmother. And call the police. For him. The lead guard released Edwards. He looked at Preston on the floor, then nodded to Ilara. Yes, Mum. But as the guard reached for his radio, the lights in the manor flickered and died. The storm outside had knocked out the main power grid. The room was plunged into the darkness of the firelight. The backup generator should kick in, Edwards said, moving to Beatrice's side. It didn't. He cut the lines, Preston rasped from the floor, his voice slurring as his jaw began to stiffen. I cut them. No. One. Comes in. Ilara looked around the darkening room. Beatrice was unconscious, her mother was collapsing, Preston was paralyzed, and they were locked in a stone fortress with no power, miles from help, with a storm raging outside. And Ilara knew, with a sinking feeling, that Preston wasn't the only threat. He had mentioned a partner on the phone, the judge, or perhaps someone else was already in the house. The darkness in the blue drawing room was absolute, save for the dying embers in the fireplace. The silence was broken only by Beatrice's ragged breathing and the terrified, shallow gasps of the paralyzed Preston on the floor. Edwards! Ilara's voice cut through the gloom, sharp and authoritative. The guards have tactical flashlights. Get them on. Now! The guards, realizing where the power now lay, immediately clicked on their heavy-duty lights. Beams of harsh white light cut through the smoke, illuminating the chaotic scene. We need to get her heart rate down, Ilara commanded, kneeling beside her grandmother. She looked at the nurse who had been cowering in the corner during the fight. You! Get the manual crash cart. I know you have one. The generator, Edwards stammered, holding a handkerchief to his bleeding head. It has a manual override in the basement, but the electronic locks will be sealed. No, Ilara said, her mind working as fast as it did during the lunch rush at the Rusty Spoon. We don't need the whole house. We just need to keep her alive until the ambulance gets here." She turned to the lead guard. "Use your radio. Get a medical chopper. I don't care about the storm. Tell them it's Beatrice Sterling." Marie crawled over to her mother's side. For the first time in 30 years, she touched Beatrice's face without fear. "Mother?" Marie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare die. You don't get to die just when I came back." Beatrice's eyes fluttered open. In the harsh beam of the flashlight, she looked at Marie, then at Ilara, who was barking orders at the guards with the ferocity of a CEO. A faint, weak smile touched the old woman's lips. Beatrice wheezed. "She has the fire." "She has your fire," Marie corrected, holding Beatrice's hand against her cheek. "And my heart." Sirens began to wail in the distance, penetrating the stone walls of the manor. The guards had called it in the moment Preston went down. Ilara leaned over them. "They're coming, Grandma. Just hold on." Beatrice looked at Ilara. "The brooch. Keep it safe." Ilara reached into her pocket, felt the cold metal of the dragonfly, and shook her head. "No. It caused too much pain. I'm not keeping it." The doors burst open. Paramedics, flanked by police officers, swarmed the room. "Over here!" Ilara shouted, waving them down. As the medics worked on Beatrice, stabilizing her heart rhythm, 2 officers approached the paralyzed figure of Preston Sterling. "He can't move," Edwards explained to the police, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Neurotoxin. He'll be fine in 6 hours, just in time for his arraignment." As they loaded Preston onto a stretcher, his eyes darted frantically between Ilara and the officers, screaming silent obscenities. He was carried out into the night, leaving his ambition on the floor. The Rusty Spoon Diner had a new sign. It was neon, bright pink, and the S was no longer missing. Inside, the smell of burnt bacon was gone, replaced by the aroma of fresh ground coffee and homemade pastries. But the linoleum floor was the same. Ilara tied her apron, a clean, crisp white one, and walked over to the corner booth. "Earl Grey, hot, with a clean cup," Ilara said with a smile, placing the mug down. Beatrice Sterling picked up the cup. She looked healthier now. Her color had returned, and though she used a cane, her back was as straight as ever. Across from her sat Marie, looking years younger, her hair dyed a soft, honey blonde, reading a book. "You know," Beatrice said, taking a sip, "you don't have to work here, Ilara. You own 51% of Sterling Group. You could be in a boardroom in Manhattan." "I like it here," Ilara said, looking around the bustling diner. She had bought the place from Rick, who was all too happy to sell after the tax audit Ilara's lawyers had arranged, and turned it into a community kitchen that employed homeless youth. Besides, someone has to make sure the tea is served right. Beatrice chuckled. It was a sound that had become frequent in the last few months. "And the dragonfly?" Beatrice asked. Ilara pointed to the wall behind the counter. Framed in a shadow box, stripped of its hidden poison needle and polished to a shine, was the Sterling dragonfly. Below it was a plaque. "Family is not about what we own. It is about who we protect." "It looks better there than it ever did on me," Marie said softly, closing her book. "It does," Beatrice agreed. She reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Then she reached out and took Ilara's. The 3 generations of Sterling women sat in the warm, noisy diner, bound not by diamonds or emeralds, but by the second chance that had started with a cup of tea on a rainy Tuesday. And that is the incredible story of how a single act of judgment turned into a miracle of redemption. Beatrice Sterling thought she was looking for a lost heirloom, but she found something far more valuable: forgiveness. Preston Sterling is currently serving 20 years for fraud and attempted murder, proving that greed really is the ultimate trap. As for Ilara, she still pours coffee at the rusty spoon, reminding us all that no matter how much money you have, you never forget where you came from. What would you do if you found out your family heirloom was worth millions? Would you sell it, or would you search for the truth like Ilara? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story that touches the heart. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.